Good morning. Today's moon set story is from the 24 Carat Buddha and Other Fables by Maxine Harris. The publisher is the Sidran Institute Press from Baltimore, Maryland. This morning's story is Better Safe Than Sorry. It was a mid-afternoon when word first came that there had been a shooting in the busy suburban community. This event seemed unlike the other reports of community violence. There was no obvious reason for the attack. No fight between drunken friends. No tirade on the part of a jealous husband. No robbery gone wrong. This was a random act of violence that left the father of 3 small boys dead. When Rosie first heard the news on her way home from work, she just shook her head. Surely the police will find out who committed this crime, she thought, as she took her seat on the crowded bus. Such a heartless killer could not remain at large for long. That night, Rosie listened with interest as the news reporters gave more details of the crime. Local leaders urged the community to remain calm and encouraged people to go about their normal business. Now, just what does that mean, she thought? Normal business? How can there be normal business when there's a killer at large? I will just do a few things to make myself safer. First, Rosie decided to stop taking the long walks that she enjoyed. Every evening after work. Ever since she was a small girl, Rosie had loved to walk. In fact, when her mother was alive, it had been one of the few things that they had enjoyed doing together. It will be sad to stop walking in the evenings, thought Rosie, but it is always better to be safe than sorry. She could hear her grandmother's voice inside her head as she said those words to herself. Her grandmother was a cautious woman who often reminded Rosie to play it safe and to take as few chances as possible. Rosie's grandmother had grown up in a poor family where every month the family had to scramble just to pay the rent. Chances are for rich people, her grandmother would say. People like us just need to survive. Perhaps her grandmother was right. The walks would need to go, at least until this killer was caught. As the days passed, the police received hundreds of tips concerning the crime, but none of them led to the apprehension of the killer. Some people thought that they had seen him drive away in a large moving van. Others reported seeing 2 men on foot. Still, others recalled seeing someone who looked suspicious in a red sports car. Each night, the news reporters discussed the latest developments, and each night, community leaders urged people to be aware of their surroundings, but to go about their normal business. Rosie no longer took her walks, but she still felt vulnerable. And when one of the experts on the nightly news referred to the killer as a sniper, Rosie decided to take yet another step to keep herself safe. Rosie's only knowledge of snipers came from the crime and war movies she watched on television. A sniper could go undetected, hiding in the bushes or on a rooftop or in a nearby building without the victim having the slightest awareness of what was about to happen. The sniper could strike and kill. It was even possible to be the victim of a sniper while you were sitting in your own home watching the evening news. If she were to be really safe, thought Rosie, that big picture window in her living room would have to be covered. One of the things Rosie had loved about her house when she first moved in was the light that streamed in through the large window that was in the center of her living room. Rosie loved looking out the window, watching the squirrels and birds in her yard, seeing the colors change as the seasons went from summer to fall. But right now, such a wide open window was just too dangerous. After all, it was as easy for the sniper to look in as it was for Rosie to look out. She would have to find a way to cover that window. The next day, after work, Rosie made a stop at the fabric store on her way home. She would buy some material for a floor-to-ceiling curtain. Now, she would feel safe as she sat at home in the evenings, since without her long walks, she now spent much more time in her living room. At first, Rosie found herself looking at all the light, sheer fabric. If I must cover my windows, she thought, at least I will make curtains that are bright and cheerful. But the more she wandered around the crowded store, it seemed that many people were buying material for curtains and shades. The more Rosie realized that sheer curtains would never do. She needed heavy material that kept out all the light if she were to really feel safe from an attacker so devious that he snuck up on people as they went about their everyday lives. Finally, Rosie settled on some heavy blue material with a floral print. If she couldn't see the real flowers in her garden, at least she could look at images of flowers. Once her curtain was complete, Rosie hung it over the big picture window that had given her so much pleasure. She was sad to give up her view and the enjoyment of watching the activity in her yard. But it was just too dangerous right now. And besides, she kept repeating her grandmother's words, "Better safe than sorry." Over the next several days, there were 2 more random shootings. The anxiety in the community turned to near panic. People who had felt that their neighborhoods were safe and open now began to question if any place was free from random violence. Rosie continued to listen to the almost hourly police briefings without any substantial leads. The police began to caution residents to be on the lookout wherever they went. One no-nonsense lieutenant warned that the sniper might be anyone, even a neighbor or a delivery person, anyone who was free to go about the community without being noticed. This latest warning left Rosie feeling very fearful. She had assumed that the people she knew were safe from suspicion, but now this lieutenant was saying that the sniper might be anyone at all. One of the things that Rosie most enjoyed about the somewhat isolated neighborhood where she lived was how friendly the other people were. Many of the residents had lived in the same small community for years. Rosie enjoyed the informal chats she would have with her neighbors as she worked in her garden or walked to the bus stop. And she liked catching glimpses of people as they walked their dogs or rode their bikes. But this sniper had changed all of that. Now, people hurried to their homes. It was too unsafe to linger on the streets corner for idle, friendly chatter. Rosie even noticed that she stopped making eye contact with people. Better not risk looking in the eye of a sniper. Better just to get inside her house and close the curtains. Since Rosie lived alone, these contacts with her neighbors had been one of her main sources of connection once she left work behind. Her neighbors were not her close friends, but being able to say hello and talk for a few minutes made life so much more pleasant. But Rosie was not going to be foolish just for a little conversation. Remember, she told herself, better safe than sorry. And besides, her neighbors did not seem much in the mood for sidewalk chatter these days either. Weeks passed. The police continued to receive information about the sniper. But the killer who had terrorized the community was still at large. The much-awaited all clear from the police never came. People speculated about what might have happened to the murderer. Had he moved to another city? Had he committed suicide? Had he just grown tired of terrorizing people? Eventually, the news stories about the sniper receded to back page status and were barely mentioned on the major news broadcasts. Most people went back to that's funny. It's so dark, my light went out. Most people went back to business as usual. But Rosie was still frightened. What if the killer was waiting for people to let up their guard so that he could strike again? This might be just the time to be more cautious than ever. Besides, Rosie had adjusted to staying home with the curtains closed. When she thought about it, she realized that she really did feel safer that way. Better safe than sorry. She smiled to herself, and Rosie lived that way for many, many years. The additional reading. Better safe than sorry. Whenever we feel confronted with danger, it makes sense to protect ourselves, and that protection may well take the form of erecting barriers that separate us from the rest of the world. For some, however, those barriers become impenetrable walls that enclose us in a world of isolation and limitation. It is especially true that when children grow up in violent and abusive homes, they cling to any source of safety, regardless of how costly and ultimately limiting it might be. After a while, the path of safety may become a way of life, and we may forget that there was a time when we gladly took more risks and ventured further afield in order to fully experience the world. Finding a healthy balance between the need for safety and the drive towards openness and exploration is a challenge for all of us, and is particularly difficult for those who have experienced profound loss or trauma. Thank you for listening this morning, and I have Zorro and Wiley for special effects.